My name is Heather Gray. I'm a clinical coordinator and supervisor at TICFA, Ohel Children's Home and Family Services Outpatient Mental Health Clinic. I am a social worker and a creative arts therapist licensed in the state of New York with over 15 years of clinical experience, both inpatient and in private practice, specializing work in couples work. I'm trained in emotionally focused therapy, interpersonal therapy, and other evidence-based modalities.
Yeah, my name is Yeshaya Kraus. I'm also a social worker, though I can't claim to have a list as long as yours. I'm the Community Engagement and Education Manager for Shalom Task Force. I'm also a therapist in private practice in Far Rockaway. I'm trained in emotionally focused therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, and working with couples is actually the reason that I got into social work to begin with. So this is a really good place for me to be, just for myself. I'm hoping to have a really fun evening here. One of the things, there are a few things that we want to accomplish this evening. One of those things is, as I said, to have fun, to enjoy ourselves, learning about different things. And we're going to be talking about an experience which is very unique. It's really, couples who have gotten married over the past couple of months, there's really a very unique experience involved to that situation. And aside from learning about it academically, this is an evening where people who come on who've been through this situation can come to share, know that they're sharing this evening with people who've also gone through the situation, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you're supported, and that there are ways to move forward, even though the beginning, the foundations may be a little bit different than what you might have expected, and might be a little bit different than what many of your friends may have done at the beginning of their marriage. So this is really going to be a discussion about building a relationship during the past couple of different and somewhat challenging months, and how to really move ahead to the future.
Thank you, Yeshaya. And I just want to really thank you for partnering with me tonight and with our agencies and working together and having a dialogue between ourselves. And we invite you, our esteemed guests, to participate as well. Please use the chat box. And you can, ask any kind of questions or make any comments that we'll respond to, incorporate throughout our meeting tonight. And at the last 15 minutes or so, we're going to open up, we're going to unmute you, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. If you feel comfortable revealing yourselves, that's fine. If you don't, that's certainly just fine as well. So we'll look forward to moving forward and talking a little bit more about this very novel, unique circumstance that you've found yourselves in as a newly married couple during these times of COVID-19, which is really very dynamic. It's very different, and as being married now, whether it is within these circumstances or not, marriage just simply brings a promise of two people coming together and joining and combining their lives and moving forward. And in saying that, so the fundamental purpose of tonight's meeting is so that we can join together and create a sense of normalcy in this world that feels anything but normal, and hopefully bring greater meaning and hope to our lives during these turbulent times.
Yeah, definitely important.
Right. So some of you may have gotten married right before the quarantine began, or during, or different dynamics, but most likely you've spent the first few days, weeks, or months of your marriage under these circumstances that certainly can be more challenging than you had ever expected. your marriage to be or to begin. But now that you've committed yourselves to building a life together and having been confined to one space and without the familiar activities that make up your routine, so early on in your relationship, it may have created some level of stress or strain in your lives, individually or as a newlywed couple.
Yeah, and I think like whenever we're talking about things like this, whenever we're talking about the challenges and the opportunities inherent in building a relationship, it's really important to put out there right up at the beginning that building a relationship in general is not easy. Building a relationship in general is something which is a challenge, it's work, and it can be stressful even under the best of circumstances. Think about the different factors that go into building a relationship. What do you have to navigate? You're two completely different people. You're two completely different personalities from different backgrounds. And even if you're going to say that there's a significant overlap, like, hey, we're both Ashkenazi, we've both done in this neighborhood, we both did like all these different overlaps. They're almost, I'm not going to say they're insignificant, but they're not that major. Everybody's going to come out and you have this unique combination of factors which makes each individual into who they are. And you're taking these two people who have developed for however many years and you're throwing them together. And then, okay, now build something together, work through this stuff. It's always difficult. It's always, there are always challenges. I'm not going to say it's always difficult because sometimes it's not difficult, sometimes it goes. But even under the best of circumstances, building a relationship can be very challenging. And then you throw on top of that all the different things that have kind of changed over the past few months. I mean, think about it. Under normal circumstances, couples tend to spend most of the day apart. And count in the number of hours that you're sleeping, which hopefully is more than 3 or 4. And I know not everybody, but most people tend to have between sleeping and working and other time that you spend out of the house just doing regular mundane daily things, you end up spending most of your day apart from each other. And that's very different now. Right now, the ideal, or at least for the past few months, hopefully we're going to start opening up a little bit. But for the past couple of months, people have been pretty much expected to stay home, stay together, don't go anywhere, just be where you are, don't go anywhere. And it's a very dramatic change. So, the idea of changing how much you're exposed to each other, that in itself can be something that you're not used to, even if you have a relationship which has been around for years and years, certainly where you have a relationship which is relatively new. And just on top of that, you have all the other things which are specific to the virus situation. There are thoughts about people's health, there's potential unemployment and financial insecurity. There may be family members who are not well or who need a little extra help because they're not supposed to be going outside, or who are maybe in that risk bracket. You're very disconnected from a lot of the things that are going on outside of your home socially. Then you got to figure out how to manage all the chores that need to be done out of the house. And in general, aside from these specific things, it's very normal to worry about, just in general, what's the future going to be like? Nobody really knows when this whole thing is really going to be over with, what things are going to look like when it is over. So it's very normal to have trouble building a relationship in the beginning, and then when you put all those other factors on top of it, it's a big list of things that you have to deal with at this point.
Right. I mean, there is no framework. I mean, not in our lifetime for the experiences that you have all begun your lives together. So I guess, the word normal or abnormal, I had a supervisor once who said to me, what is normal? That's a cycle in a washing machine. Mm-hmm. So, right, there's just...
a similar bumper sticker. Such an important concept.
Right. So, but what if I would suggest to all of you that this whole COVID-19 coronavirus situation could actually be good for you and for your marriage, right? It could actually, and I've been thinking, and a lot of people have been talking about how to cope and how to manage. And one of the intrinsic ways to really think about this is through finding silver linings. So I'm going to suggest that having been quarantined or still being in quarantine is a fantastic opportunity for growth, individually and for your relationship and for your marriage. Stressful situations tend to bring people together in the end, even though it might be difficult at times and very, very frustrating and confusing. Having the foresight and imagining your lives 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years down the road, looking back and saying, wow, look how we began, look how we started, and look how far we've come, and look how we had the fortitude and resilience and capacity to begin in this kind of way. It's almost like behind the eight ball. So perhaps quarantining as a newlywed can be viewed as a great opportunity for growth and building a very strong relationship and foundation for your lives as a couple and for your future family.
This is not to say that it's going to be easy. We're saying the potential is there. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Yeshaya, easy is boring.
That could be true. That could be true.
So the other thing I'm going to also suggest is that having been or being in quarantine is probably going to be the one time, hopefully in your lives, that you will have so much extra time together to learn about each other, to get to know each other, to find out about yourselves on deeper levels. You may never ever have this again. It's much like an extended honeymoon. And it's also a time to perhaps reconnect or connect on a spiritual level.
Yeah, and this is a very interesting idea. If you look at the research, I don't want to get into like hashkafa or anything, but if you look at just even the basic clinical scientific research that people have done, one of the major supportive factors that's able to get people through all sorts of mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, grief, trauma, is the ability to connect to something spiritually. Whether if you want to look in Alcoholics Anonymous terminology, the idea of a higher power and of surrendering the things that you can't control and enabling yourself to focus on the things that you can control and you can make a difference in is tremendous. The idea of the idea of connecting with your sense of spirituality as an individual and the two of you coming together and connecting with your sense of spirituality as a couple can not only support you within the situation as it is now, but can really, I think, bring out a lot of strength within your relationship and can really help that to be stronger for years and years to come. If you're able to both together draw on that sense of spirituality and connection to something bigger and greater, that can be a tremendous strength for you individually and as a couple, and hopefully, for your family going forward.
Yeah, I would imagine it's also cathartic in terms of it being a release, a let go of, I don't have this kind of control. And, not having to assume that responsibility or the worry or the fear that there's just so much more and so much greater out there.
Yeah.
And let's, come together as a couple and support each other in that way to feel safe and good and strong.
Yeah. It's like the things that we tend to worry about are the things that we feel on some level we can do something about. When we honestly believe that there's really nothing we can do about it, it's not as much on our mind. It's not something that eats away at us and makes us try to think of different ways to get around it or to plan or to come up with ideas of how to do things. It's not on me. I'm not in control. I'm not in charge. I just have to do the best I can. And that's something that can be really helpful in these situations.
right? It's a release. But Yeshaya and I were talking about the circumstances under which getting married during this period of time. So we both really felt that it's important to acknowledge um, some loss, a loss that of expectations of what you might have anticipated your marriage to the wedding to be like, the week following Sheva Brachot, um, and how to make peace with that, how to accept it, and you know, after talking about this and speaking to a lot of people, uh, you know, the messages are that many of you have spent, much time, money planning a wedding and looking forward to celebrating this occasion with your family and friends at this wedding of your dreams. For years, many chassanas and kalas, bride and grooms alike, have this mental picture of this most absolutely perfect chasana wedding, the most memorable night of your life, and all that it leads up to, and for that week following, and then beyond. Whether it's like shopping for the perfect gown or sheitel or wardrobe for Sheva Brachot, doing the shopping and being accompanied by your mother, sisters, cousins, aunts, mother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, friends, the singer, hall, songs, invitations, ultimately standing under the chuppah, enveloped by your family and friends. And then in a blink of an eye, without any preparation, that dream might have been just completely shattered and taken away. And I guess in total disbelief. And many people are still like, is this really happening? Is this going on? That dream was shattered, one that you might have just had and held your whole life. And then how do you have this, just this whole harsh reality of facing a global pandemic on so many levels? And the other thing is perhaps feeling that it was taken from you, stolen. It's the unfairness of it all. Many of your, might have felt, well, your friends had that perfect chasana, but you didn't. And even though, we say, starting this bite yaman is the real focus, still being deprived of that simcha might have felt you feeling sad, angry, to some degree, even resentful. And then perhaps to add insult to injury, when other people might have said, well, at least you should be grateful because it could have been worse. That might have made it even more tolerable to accept. So I definitely want to acknowledge that loss of that initial, being Hassan, Kala, bride and groom for, that period of time, and having the community just, honor you in that very public way.
Yeah, and I want to point out also, I realize like there's also the flip side. I mean, you think about it, it's very possible that people who do feel exactly as you just described, that you'll have one couple that's like really taking very, very hard, and maybe you don't, and you're not having a hard time. You're wondering, like, is there something wrong with me? Maybe, like, why am I not having a hard time with this? Am I normal? And I think that it's a very common thing to experience when you have a whole lot of people who are experiencing this range of very intense emotions and feelings of loss and grief, and you are dealing with it differently, and you see, like, okay, well, what am I missing? And the thing is, that's the truth is that everybody really deals with these things very differently. Some people deal with it by being able to just focus on life as it is and going on, and some people have different reasons to be caught up in what they weren't able to have in the way they wanted. And it's all normal, as you said. Normal is a washing machine.
Cycle on a washing machine. And the other part of it, there are differences in feelings, approaches, loss or not, even within the couple itself. There might be one of you that are like, this is just devastating. I lost my dream. Another person, your spouse may say, well, great. So, I didn't really want this big wedding. You might have a more practical approach to it.
Yeah.
So, even within yourselves, there might be, differences in feeling feelings of satisfaction or loss or, you know, emptiness or fulfillment.
Right.
And
And
that's
even,
normal
yeah,
too, right?
right, right. There you go. And I think aside from that, there may be differences also in terms of how you express it. You can have two people, and we're gonna touch on this a little bit more further on, but you can have two people who are really feeling the same intensity deep down of loss and of resentment, or positive emotions also. You can have two people who feel excited and joyful and fulfilled, and will show it in completely different ways. And especially in the beginning of a new relationship, let's say you have, let's say the husband is a very expressive person and the wife is more of a pragmatic kind of person who's not as emotionally expressive. So the husband could feel like, here I am all by myself, I'm just sharing these feelings and I'm not getting any feedback, or I'm wondering if she's going through the same thing. You can have that kind of a discrepancy also in terms of how you actually express yourself and how you share what you're feeling within the context of the relationship. I think it's important just to be able to sit down with yourself and kind of close your eyes and say, whatever I'm doing, that's normal. Whatever I'm doing, there's a reason that I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, because it has worked for me, and this is just how I'm going. And don't worry about, should I be feeling some other way? Should I be feeling this way or that way? It's all how it is. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I think that's a really important thing just to acknowledge. And honestly, if you come out of tonight just with that idea of I'm normal, then you're in great shape. Seriously, I think that's a great thing to come out of tonight with. But I think it's also important, beyond the idea of being normal and being okay with yourself, you go into the idea of what exactly are you looking to accomplish? You have your marriage, and now, okay, now what? You're in this completely new situation, and it can be very difficult or challenging to deal with it. When you're not used to being in this kind of a relationship, and especially as we mentioned with all these other factors that are just kind of dumped down on you. You have to try to set up your home together. That's really what you're looking to do together, ideally. So one thing to be aware of when you're faced with this kind of a task is, what are your expectations? What are your expectations of the relationship in general? And what are your expectations of each other within the specific context of what we're going through now? Expectations are really great, honestly, because they help you to kind of make sure that you're comfortable with whatever's going on. And if your expectations are not being met for some reason, you can talk about them, you can address that. But you might want to also look at those expectations and think, okay, does it really make sense to hold on to every single expectation that I have, given the current context? One thing, and I think this is a Western culture thing, the message that goes out there is that once you're married, you spend all your time together, you're great together, and head over heels, everything is wonderful. Fact is, you're still an individual. The idea that married people become completely dependent on each other is not 100% true. There's a book, actually, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He uses 3 terms, which I think really perfectly describe this kind of situation. You can have somebody who's dependent, who really needs their needs filled by other people. And you can have somebody who's independent, who's capable of doing by themselves. And then you have somebody who's interdependent, who, while they're capable of doing what they need to do for themselves, they're also able to rely on others to help them meet those needs. So being interdependent is the ideal in a healthy relationship. You're able to do for yourself, you're able to express yourself, you're able to voice your needs, you're able to meet those needs, and you're able to work with someone else to meet both your own needs and the needs of the other person. That being said, as an interdependent person, you're still an individual, and you're going to need some time to yourself. Now, usually, under slightly more usual circumstances, it's it's kind of easy to find that. You know, people have changes of scenery during the day. People are able to use that to kind of rebalance themselves and readjust themselves, and to go back home with a different mindset. You know, you're able to get back into the home mode, I guess, with a kind of a fresher head. If you're spending all your time at home and your home mode becomes your work mode and your family mode and your spouse mode and every other mode that you have, it can be kind of hard to really differentiate between all those different modes. Now, there's this idea that wanting time away is a sign of an unhealthy relationship, which is really not true. People need that time to kind of rebalance themselves. So there are two parts to this, because we're talking to both sides of the spouse aisle. First off, you have to be able to. It's important to understand that your spouse is going to need some space to some extent, and to be okay with that. You know, don't be insulted if your husband says, "I really need to just have some quiet time to be by myself." Or don't be insulted if your wife says, "Listen, you know, I know you love being around me, but I need a little bit of breathing space." That's not just okay, it's important for your mental health to be able to have that time to rebalance. The level to which everybody needs it is going to be different, obviously. Different people need different things, but everybody's going to need that. So don't be insulted if your spouse says something like that. The other idea is that understand that you're going to need it. You're going to need it yourself. The same way that you don't need to take offense if your spouse says they need some space. Don't worry that you're going to insult the other person by saying, "I really need to take a little bit of a breather right now." You know, if you have enough space, you know, just practically speaking, how does that work out? If you have enough space, then maybe you can have like a room which is designated as the private quiet time room. Or if you don't have space, maybe there are other ways that you can do that. You know, one suggestion you have mentioned is the idea of creating artificial boundaries by putting on headphones. And, you know, it's a discussion. You know, it's something that you both really do have to be comfortable with, but there are definitely ways to kind of work through that particular challenge.
You know, Yeshaya, I just want to jump in because something that just crossed my mind. So it's okay to give yourself a time out.
Mm-hmm.
Like typically, I mean, even if you don't have the expectation that my husband, my wife, my partner is going to be my whole world to me, we do get different parts of ourselves fulfilled from different work, different places, whether it be on the work front, the people that we interact with, the work that we do, the friends that we socialize with, our family, the day-to-day activities that make us feel fulfilled, whether they're intellectually driven or artistically or musically or whatever it is. They all come into play and fill our different needs. And then when we're in this artificial situation of being confined to a space for a very extended period of time without knowing when it's going to end and sort of rebound, we can look to our spouse to fulfill all those parts that we typically may get from other sources, right? So it's understandable to want that one person to be that everything, and it's also okay to feel that where are the other parts, and where are the other parts of me coming from, and how do I get them, and how do I let go of the shoulds, the woulds, the could haves, these different kinds of expectations.
Yeah, and I think just to come off of what you just said, it's going to end up being different for everybody, like what level each of you is able to support the different parts of you. But you have to also make sure that your spouse is able to give you that support. Like especially in the beginning of a relationship, different areas of support may not be able to be given at that point. They may not be used to being in that kind of a situation. They may not be used to giving emotional support or whatever kind of support you may need in whichever area it is. So it's something that you really have to think about. Is my spouse okay doing that? And again, it's a discussion. Communication is the single most important part of being able to get through this stuff. So if you have a question here, I'm just gonna bring this up because I think this is a really important piece. What about the couple whose husband is sitting and learning and there's no space in the home for both? That is a very good question. That is a tremendously good question. And what I would say is that there's probably got to be some form of compromise that's reached between the two. I mean, on the one hand, obviously you both value learning, you both value full-time learning. If that's who you married each other, obviously, so that's what you value, that's what's important to you. And the question is, what level of that are you able to do? What level of that are you able to do, and what level of that are you able to, I guess, hold back on to allow your spouse to get some kind of personal space in the kind of situation? That's a very good question. I suspect that it's not just about learning either. I've seen, over the past few weeks, I've seen numerous posts about the people who are forced to work from home. And they have like maybe one small kitchen where you have, 2 people using it as an office, and you have 4 kids using it as a classroom. This idea of really being able to balance and to give compromise when it comes to limited space. This is on the one hand, it's a logistical need, which has to be worked out. On the other hand, it's really an exercise in being able to understand the other person's point, understand the other person's perspectives and needs, and to be able to work through a compromise together that works out for the most part for both of you. It's not going to be perfect, but that's really what it boils down to. It's an exercise in compromise.
And not only that, I mean, even if you step back a little bit, it's even about knowing what it is that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to give that over to your spouse and communicate that in a way that feels safe and that feels okay, and that can be received in a positive way, and not being fearful of communicating your own needs.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Right, because marriage really is the single biggest shift a person can go through in your life. I mean, maybe there will be more. There will be, God willing, children and grandchildren and different kinds of life transitions. But from singlehood to marriage is huge. It's exponentially great. So, and it's especially, I mean, it's got many new nuances when you're in isolation. Especially, there's a lot of increased exposure to heightened emotions within yourself or with your spouse. Again, I'm going to use the word, it's normal to experience higher levels of stress in a relationship when otherwise they may not have presented themselves ever, or not so early on. You may not be familiar to, even if you knew your spouse to be in a very deep and rich way, you may never have seen him or her in this feeling of isolation and anxiety. And also the other part is not knowing how long, and perhaps other concerns, financial concerns, physical concerns, health concerns. Those certainly come together and increase levels of stress, right? So, and also, I mean, jobs, loss of jobs, gaining new jobs, new homes, starting a new apartment or a home together, new schedules, tons and tons of new adjustments. And they're all specific to each and every person, and not only what they are, but how you interpret it and how you experience it and feel it. So I mean, it looks like we're moving into a more positive trajectory in terms of this pandemic. It's certainly opening up, and there's like an overall, for many people that I speak with, an overall sense of positive energy and hopefulness. There still may be a sense of nervousness, or even perhaps there have been losses. Somebody that you knew or a relative or may have been ill or even passed away. Um, so I think it's a fair assumption to say that right now routines have been incredibly disrupted. Um, and we can be on edge, and we are on edge, and to be mindful of that, and to know, and to take our own internal temperature, to know what are our triggers, and then to learn, what are our spouse's triggers, what makes him or her feel safe and secure, or what makes them feel anxious. um, and to be observant and sensitive to that, and in sort of testing out the waters of this marriage that you find yourselves in with your spouse, to make a new routine, and together, and to create a plan for the present and also for the future, and moreover uh, to learn how to navigate rough waters, and to let things go, and to just um, take things in stride within, understanding the universe, the environment as well.
Yeah, and I love what you said about taking your internal temperature, because I think there are a lot of people who are going through this situation just as individuals who, if you would have asked them a year ago, how do you think you would react to having to be at home for 3 months? They would have said, yeah, I'd be fine with it. I'd be okay. But at the end of the day, where they are right now, they're not fine. They're just not doing well. And people are reacting. Not only do you not know how your spouse is going to react, but your spouse might not really have any real idea how they're going to deal with this particular situation, because it's never happened before, or it hasn't happened in a good 100-something years, and certainly never on this kind of scale.
And
So
also prolonged exposure, right?
yeah,
In the
yeah,
beginning, we have this adrenaline rush, and it's going to come and it's going to leave. It's going to go away very quickly, and then the prolonged experience of how long and when will this end?
yeah, yeah. So that's something to really just understand and to think about. Like when you're trying to chart your course together through this, you don't know how each other are going to act. You might not even really be familiar enough with yourself to know how you're going to react given the situation. And in situations like this, conflict is not uncommon. In any relationship, again, just to go back to the basics, foundationally speaking, conflict is a given in any relationship, because you have two completely different people and two different perspectives on everything. It's completely normal and to have fights and to have arguments. In fact, if you use them properly and you're able to really work them out together, you can take a conflict and use it to build the relationship, and use it to bring yourselves closer together by helping each other to navigate it properly and arriving at some kind of a solution, which is really which works out for the most part for both of you. Conflict is only problematic when it's not dealt with properly, when it's not dealt with in a healthy way. So seeing as how it is normal, then again, you just plop this all down on top of you. It's very possible that conflicts may become a little bit more intense. Conflicts may be a little bit more common. So and if that ends up happening, it may be time to start thinking about what's going on and to figure out exactly how to best move forward. Obviously, the best way to move forward is by talking about it and working out exactly what's going on. In really intense situations, there may be, maybe you can speak to somebody, speaking to a mentor, speaking to a therapist. I wasn't supposed to give a plug for the hotline until later, but I'm going to give a plug here anyway. We have our hotline where people call in when they're concerned about their relationships. We'll give you the number at the end, but just to be aware of what's going on in your relationship is the first step. To be aware of how conflict is presenting itself, and to be aware of what's going on for you personally. When one part, so when you see that conflicts are coming up more frequently, there is a possibility, and it's likely, that these are just different feelings that are kind of leaking out that need to be addressed and need to be worked through together. When you have one partner who's feeling, say, anxious, the other one can listen. The other one can listen in and show support. And that may be all the person needs. That maybe all your spouse needs to kind of bounce back to the baseline of not being anxious and not being argumentative. People sometimes get that way when they're scared or when they're nervous or when they have intense feelings that they're not expressing in any other way. It's kind of like a seltzer bottle. You shake it up too much, and then you open it, way more comes out than what you intend to have coming out. So having conversations about what's going on in each other's lives emotionally can help you to kind of open the cap slowly and kind of vent things slowly in a controlled situation so that the whole thing doesn't explode all over the place. When you are listening, so sometimes people just need to vent. Sometimes you don't want to have help problem solving. Sometimes you just want to talk about what's going on, and that in itself will help. Sometimes you do want your spouse to help you with problem solving, and you have to ask. You have to know what kind of help your spouse needs. You can also just use this at the time, as you mentioned before. You're together. It's kind of like you can use the time to really get to know each other better. You can focus on enhancing your emotional connection with each other through good communication, positive communication, making your relationship stronger than it already is, both by addressing any negative things that may be happening as they arise and not letting them kind of smolder and blow up when you don't want them to. And by sharing the positive parts of it, which kind of goes back to the spirituality that we were talking about before, being able to share that, being able to share the positives that you're taking out of the situation can also be very helpful, and being honest about it. I really feel that this is a positive, or I really feel that this is a negative thing, but being open about such things. When you're addressing negative issues, make sure that there's a good way to say it. There's a way which is not as productive. You don't want to try placing blame if it's a concern that you have about each other. Talk about your feelings. When you talk about your own feelings, that's your experience, that's your world. And it's very hard to argue with somebody when you say, I feel sad. No, you don't feel sad. No, you feel sad. People do this with kids all the time, but that's a different story. You're talking about your own feelings, and maybe talk about how you want to address those feelings. Also, you might want to think about the distinction between smaller and larger fights. Smaller ones might not be worth addressing in the here and now. Is it something that you can live with? Is it something that you really feel is very important to you? Think about it. Think about what it really means to you to address this in the here and now.
Right. Yeshaya, I just want to just piggyback on what you're saying, to be careful and to be aware of using blaming language. You did that, or you should have done that, and really try to reframe that as, how can we do this together, right? And the other part is not only about like expression of one's own feelings or sadness or disappointment or happiness or whatever, but it's also being a really good listener, being a recipient of and being attuned to your spouse's experiences, both internal and external. What are they saying, or what do you think that they're feeling when, either through verbal language or even nonverbal language? When he or she steps away and withdraws from me, what do I perceive he or she saying to me? What are they trying to communicate? So it's not only just verbal and nonverbal, and it's not only expression, but it's also receiving.
Yeah, it's really, really being there and being present and being able to pick that up. And again, it's not easy, but especially in these situations, it can only be helpful to do something like that. I just want to mention That it's especially with people that you don't know so well. Even if you had a real solid relationship with each other before you got married, you may not feel so comfortable sharing your feelings because you don't really know each other all that well, and you may end up suppressing them to a degree, which is okay. It's natural to not feel 100% comfortable. Just be aware that the way to build a healthy relationship is by sharing those feelings and by allowing yourself to be somewhat vulnerable and allowing the other person to be there to support you.
And through that repair,
Yeah.
through that repair, that's really how couples grow closer and more, intimate with each other, is by, learning about yourselves on deeper levels, and being able to accept those messages of, of pain or hurt, and just, and hearing them acknowledge, and shifting the cycle, especially since, like, at this time, this, like I had said earlier, you may have received different supports, whether it be the work, or family, or friends, or out there in the world. Right now, being in quarantine, most people are really physically separate from those people that they've known their whole lives, or their friends or family that you've grown up with, those people that have been constant or safe figures that enrich your lives, or are part of your everyday life. And now that you're not physically able to be with them, and without a clear end in sight, feeling those losses, or the frustrations, can even exacerbate the emotions that could potentially affect your relationship. Right? So even, being able to go over to your friend or a parent, and getting that support, or the guidance, or even just a hug, may not be available. So learning how to transfer those emotions to your spouse without overwhelming anybody, and just, safe, creating a new way of having a relationship, boundaries with each other, providing each other with that extra little bit of support and love that your partner may have gotten in other places. So to be aware that there are parts that at this time now, your partner may need a little bit more from you, right? Because perhaps even, like, going away for Shabbos, or visiting friends or family, that may not, be part of a possibility in your life right now.
Yeah.
And also, the other part is, let's say you've been in quarantine with your spouse's family.
Yeah.
And this is a whole new dynamic to be with the in-laws, and perhaps feeling like a newcomer into the relationship, and even being, you use that word vulnerable before, Yeshaya, even being more vulnerable, and feeling perhaps even more alone in ways that you never have. So to be sensitive to your partner's experiences in that way too. And well, I guess a way that you might address that is by putting in the effort to have a special time together as a couple, separate from in-laws, or that you're more attuned to the difficulties, the challenges of being a newly married spouse in an in-laws home.
Yeah, which is very different. I mean, a big part of the role of a couple in general is really making your own identity as a couple different from your families of origin. That I imagine is much more difficult when you're actually living in your family's home. There's the Yiddish phrase that "Sige Kimmener." The one who comes in, this is the one who's there. It's not like you're creating a new family system. It's that you're joining a system which is already active, and you're trying to find your place in that family system, and also create your own family system as a couple. And that can be really, really difficult. And that's where it's really super important to be able to make time for yourselves, regular, consistent time, whether even it's just a walk around the block or sitting outside in the backyard if that's possible, even sitting on the fire escape, and pulling the blinds, just to have some time to be together by yourselves as a couple is tremendously important.
And to make, your new partner, to create that alliance.
Yeah.
To safeguard that relationship, and make, even though it's, a new relationship or relatively young relationship, to make it the core of your existence, of your social existence. It's your partner, it's your marriage, it's the center, it's the nucleus. And to really protect your spouse, and make them important to you, and also to reflect to others how important that person is to you.
Yeah, and that's a big part of showing support and of making your spouse feel important to you, is how they see you relating to them when you're around other people. And that kind of situation that I mentioned before, where you're with one side, then that can be super important. It'd be really a way to make an opportunity out of something which obviously is not ideal. I think at this point, like, it's important to understand the concept of validation. You have one spouse who's going through whatever it is they're going through, and you want to be able to support them. We touched on this briefly before, but the idea of being a good listener, of being someone who can safely listen to somebody else talking about their concerns and about their difficulties and about their challenges. And again, we don't want to limit this to the negative side of things either. To be able to listen when your spouse wants to share something positive that happened to them, to be able to be there and to be that good listener, to be that, so I guess you could call it the receptacle for the other person's experience. To be able to listen without showing any judgment, and to be able to encourage your partner and to side with them, obviously as appropriate, to really validate and empathize with the other person's experiences. Like that was something really hard that you went through, or wow, that sounds terrible, or that sounds really amazing, it sounds great. You really want to be able to be there and to encourage them to share with you whatever's important to them, whether it's something that's really hard for them, or whether it's something that wasn't hard at all and was really amazing for them. You want to be able to share, and validating their experience is a way to encourage them to do that. You want to appreciate the experience itself, and not only that, you want to appreciate that they're willing to share it with you, because it's the sharing that runs the biggest risk in a relationship. I'm sharing something that I feel is important to me. Well, what if the other person doesn't? What if the other person thinks it's silly? So by them sharing, that's them being vulnerable and putting themselves in a position to potentially get hurt. And then that's what builds the relationship, when you react in a way which encourages them and supports them.
And the other part is, I just want to piggyback again on what you said, Yeshaya. So it doesn't, if your partner comes to you with a problem or something, it doesn't mean that, you're the responsible partner for fixing it. It's not about problem solving, and it's not, it's not your responsibility to necessarily fix it. It just may be about being a really good listener and saying, yeah,
that may just be what they need.
Right. Or, inviting yourself in, do you need anything from me? How can I be there for you? Especially in this new kind of relationship where you don't really know each other that well. Asking, how can help me understand? How can I be there for you? How can I support you? In what way would that feel right for you?
Yeah, and just to be aware and to be sensitive of what your spouse needs in the given situation. And again, like if these are conflict things, as we mentioned before, these are things that you might want to let certain things go. You might not want to let certain things go. Just to really be mindful about it, to really be purposeful about when you feel the need to take whatever it is that your spouse is saying and say, well, okay, I disagree, or to make it into something big. And again, using the I feel statements, sharing your own experience as opposed to taking their position and either blaming it or invalidating it. That's just to be very careful about how you do that.
Right, it's a whole new language of pronouns, your preferred pronouns. Instead of I and me, it's us and we. And learning that language and that part of your lexicon and incorporating it into your daily repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is not to forget to remember that being part of this couple doesn't mean that your individual dreams, your individuality, who you have been and are is lost. It's important to maintain, reflect on, and prioritize your individual dreams, and to carve time out with your spouse and share that with your spouse. Let him or her know. This is who you are. This is what's important. This is what I've been always thinking about. And developing a plan of what is important to me, what is important to you, and how do we bridge it, and how do we bring it together, and how do we make this part of our relationship together, right? Because, the individual is nuances make the sum of the two make the relationship greater, but you don't need to don't lose yourself in the couple. Bring these two parts of yourselves, the many different parts of yourselves together, enrich it, make it colorful, make it this kaleidoscope
Right.
of a new marriage, right? So who am I as an individual, and share with your spouse, who do I want to be? Who do you want to be? Here are some of my personal dreams and longings. Tell me about yours. How can we support each other and share these dreams that we've had to create a new shared meaning as a couple? So explore them with your partner. And, not only for now, but also, your future, your family. This will pass, right?
We hope.
See yourself in the future.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. The idea of talking about your dreams and talking about what you want out of life. Hopefully you've done that to some extent before, but to really create that shared meaning of not just as two engaged people, but as a couple. You're a family. You're working towards a common goal of building that family, and both of you understanding clearly, okay, right here, right now, what do I want to do with this? What do I want to do in this situation? That can be a very powerful thing, can really bring you together. And it doesn't have to be just some kind of a lofty idea about like, oh yeah, someday I'd like to, I don't know, fill in the blank, whatever it is you want. I don't know, a unicorn and a pony, whatever it is. It can be something, it can be really concrete stuff. You want to be able to have goals and ambitions for the future, but not just a matter of having goals and ambitions, but really a long-term plan. You can plan for what you want to see your lives being 3, 5, 10 years down the road. I used to say that the most annoying question in dating is, where do you see yourself 5 years down the road? Because honestly, nobody really knows. But if you change the question a little bit, where do you want to see yourself 5 years down the road? That's a very different story. You have plans, and you can really start working together to build those plans, and to not just to build them, but to start actualizing them, start making them happen. And it's not only something which is productive just on a practical perspective of, okay, I have a plan, now how am I going to work towards it? But it can be something which really distracts you from the challenges that are inherent in what's going on right now, and having to be home and not really being able to advance a lot of the things that we would normally be doing. And it can be also really therapeutic. It can really help you to like, okay, right now things are hard, things are a little different, but this is what I want to do once we get out. This is what we can do.
They may not be really difficult. They may be great too, right?
That too. They might be great. You might not want to leave this ever.
You're safe, nest together.
Right.
So that might be anxiety inducing. What will it be like when we're no longer in this safe, intimate cocoon, just you and I together, and the world is shut off.
Yeah, yeah. People have very different reactions to different situations. So yeah, some people might be excited to go, I don't know, run out in the street and shake the hands of everybody they meet. And some people might say, okay, yeah, the state is opening up, I'm bolting the door and staying inside because I'm good, I'm fine where I am. But the idea of really having those goals can help you to kind of chart a course through whichever way you're reacting to it. However you're reacting to it, this can really help you to get through it and get to it. It'll be a lot easier to deal with any difficulties that may come about right now or down the road if you have a plan, if you know what you're looking to do. For now, you're focusing on developing creative ways to survive throughout the remainder of the crisis. Having a plan for what you want to do short term also can be very therapeutic and can be very distracting. If you have a plan and you know what you're doing and you know what's going on with yourself and your life and your schedule and what you want to accomplish, even on a short-term basis, that can be very helpful and very fulfilling. And the same thing goes with financial planning. You want to be able to plan financially and be able to make the best decisions possible. Finances are actually one of the top 3 stressors that affect couples ever. So being able to get on the same page and develop an idea of how you want to navigate financially over the next couple of months is a good way to connect. It's a good way to have discussions, and it's a good way to figure out exactly what you're up to. Aside from that, just practically speaking, you want to be able to find some time to do things together that you're both going to enjoy. People talk about having date night once a week. Obviously, date night now, the options are a little limited. Most of the favorite restaurants are not accepting eat-in customers. Most of the entertainment venues are closed. But there are other activities that you may be able to find to do. We mentioned before the idea of sitting out on a fire escape or a balcony. The important part is connecting and doing something fun together.
Right. And it's not only for now. I would say, going forward, don't forget to enjoy yourself and enjoy your lives together. Yeah. I mean, that's so important to bring this sense of joy and fun and levity. Life isn't just about the struggle and the challenge. There's that balance.
Yeah, there's definitely the balance, and it's one thing that struck me when I was reading. Research shows that you can have a couple whose communication is really not great, but if they have fun together, then overall their relationship will be in pretty good shape. They can get into fights and they can end up yelling at each other and doing whatever it is that they're going to do. But if they make a conscious effort to have fun together, that can really balance things out. So that's really that's a massively important point to be able to have fun together. You want to make go ahead. Yeah, you want to make you want to make sure that your ratios of fun to everything else are good ratios. You want to make sure that you're taking a steady dose of enjoying each other and enjoying each other's company and doing fun activities together or doing enjoyable activities together, if you want to call it that. You want to make sure that you're getting that in there, because that's really important for any relationship.
So, gosh, I can't believe it. It's already late. It's already 10 after 9. So, nice. I'm going to open it up, and if anybody has any thoughts or feelings or anything that we shared with you tonight, we'd love to hear from you. I do want to add, if you do find yourself in a position that you feel you do need additional supports, that's normal too, and that's okay. At Ohel, we have a lot of different kinds of services. We have a mental health outpatient clinic that we provide services for individuals, families, couples from birth through the entire lifespan. We have a crisis intervention hotline that you could call, and you don't have to be a client, registered client, but a trained counselor will speak to you. We do have ongoing TheraZoom groups for people with touching upon a whole bunch of different issues. So please, you can find this information on Ohel's website. And my name's Heather Gray, and you can certainly, if you have anything that you'd like to address to me after, or you think about it, my email address is heather_gray, Grey, @ohelfamily.org.
Yeah, and just to jump off of that, Ohel definitely offers a huge range of services. You know, I know a lot of the therapists personally, and they're really great therapists. Shalom Task Force also, there are a few services that I think would be very useful for people to know about. The one thing that most people know about Shalom Task Force is our domestic abuse hotline, which we get calls from people who have concerns about their relationships, and not even necessarily abusive, but just they're concerned, they have questions, they want to talk something out with someone. We have people on the phone who can kind of just listen to you and help you to kind of air that out. And aside from that, if you end up needing a referral for services of then they can give you those kinds of, they can guide you to finding those services and getting in touch with whatever services you may need. We have our legal services also, which are available for those who may need them. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, we do have a marriage program called the Shalom Workshop, which has been around for quite some time. It's a really great program. The program is evidence-based, and in this program we talk about communication skills, we talk about conflict resolution, we talk about understanding the emotional dynamics of relationships. And these are things like when people first get married, it's not something that you necessarily have any experience with, and it's very new. Learning about all these things can really help you to put a little bit of an extra boost in your marriage, and to really help you to make the most of your relationship, and help you to really make the best of whatever the situation is, and give you the tools to learn it. It's an experiential workshop, so it's not the kind of thing where you just sit there and listen to somebody drone on for however many hours the workshop is. You're involved, you're engaged, you're actually working the exercises right then and there. You know, if anybody wants to, actually, I'm going to put my email address in the text box. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me about it, you know, that's a great place to email me, and I will be happy to direct you to the people who can actually give you that workshop. Yeah, you know, if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to that they feel wasn't addressed that we should be addressing, I can put it in the chat box, or
So I actually, yeah, so like there's lots of supports out there, right, between our joint organizations, and we partner on a lot of things together, and the community. But, right, I actually did unmute anybody. So if anybody would like to share or add or comment on anything, please, you know, it's your forum, and you know, please feel comfortable if you do.
if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to post questions in the chat box as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.